Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Putri Ansofia binti Muhammad Jeffrey. My matrix number 2020478414. So today I'm going to present a chapter which is communication strategy. So communication strategy always involves 5 basics considerations, which is communicator, audience, message, channel, choice, and cultural context. So moving on to the next slide. So communication strategy. As you formulate communication strategy, you should also consider your communication objectives. Like, what do you want from this interaction? When you're having a conversation, what do you want from that conversation? Next is your communication style. Like, how will you approach your subject and your audience? Is it like, just go for it, or like say hi and introduce yourself? Having a conversation. Next is your credibility. What does your audience think of you, and how will that affect their response? So moving on to the next lecture, communication objectives. So defining your objectives will make you more efficient and effective as a communicator. So the first one is general objective. For example, improve corporate cash flow. Next is action objective, which is we want to see any action of this, which is like, for example, reduce accounts receivable aging to 30 days or less. So we want to see any actions. Next is communication objective, like after you communicate, you want to see something, which is, for example, as a direct result of this letter, phone call, personal contact, this client will be motivated to pay the account. So next, communication style. So your choice of communication style will depend on 2 key factors. So the first one is audience involvement. Will this audience will be more passive or more active as we communicate? Let's say you're in a campaign or any event that you made, and obviously you want to know if your audience will respond to you, right? So next is content control. Like, how much control will we need over the content of this communication? And then next is 4 choices emerge for you to select from, which is the first one, tell. Second one is consult. The third one is sell. The fourth one is join. The tell sell styles feature lower audience involvement and higher content control. Use the tell style to inform and the sell style to persuade. In these situations, you have already sufficient information. You don't need to hear others' opinion or ideas, and you don't need or want to control message content yourself. So next slide is the consult or join style. The consult and join styles feature higher audience involvement and lower content control. It uses the consult style to gather information or learn from the audience. It also uses the join style to collaborate with members of the audience. So in this situation, you do not have sufficient information. You need to hear others' opinion, ideas, or input, and you want to involve your audience in content. So moving on to the next slide, which is communication credibility. So there's 5 factors will generally affect your credibility, which is rank, goodwill, expertise, image, and shared values. So begin by emphasizing your initial credibility and work to increase your acquired credibility with the audience. So moving on to the next strategy, which is audience strategy. It involves answering 4 sets of questions, which are: who are they, what do they know, what do they feel, and how can you motivate them? So who are they? There are primary audience, secondary audience, gatekeepers, opinion leaders, and also key decision makers. So next, what do they know? Like, how much background information do they need? Like, how much new information do they need, and what are their expectations and preferences? So there are 3 types of preferences, which is like style preferences, formal or informal. Next is channel preferences, like paper, email, face-to-face, group, or individual. Last but not least is length and format preferences, like how should this message appear to your audience. So next, how do they feel? Like, what is your level of interest in your message? What's their probable bias? Like, is it positive, negative, or is it neutral? And how difficult is your desired outcome for them? Like, would this be relatively easy for them to buy into or somewhat difficult? So you must know how do they feel. Next, how can you motivate them? The first one, you can motivate them by shared values and common ground. Next is goodwill and reciprocity. Next is rank and reward or punishment. Last is message structure. So next is message strategy. Consider emphasis and organizations, right? The first one is using a direct approach. The second one is using the indirect approach. Advantages of the direct approach is it improves comprehension, and it's audience-centered, and also it saves time. But why don't more people use the direct approach? It is because it is habit, suspense, academic training, and effort involving. So for the direct approach, when should you consider using a direct communication approach to your audience? It is when all non-sensitive messages with no emotional overtone, sensitive messages if the audience bias is positive, sensitive messages if the audience is result-oriented, and also sensitive messages if your credibility is particularly high. So moving on to indirect approach. When should you consider using an indirect communication approach to your audience? Because this approach takes longer and does not take advantage of an audience's initial attentiveness at the beginning of message. We can use it only when sensitive message with emotional overtones and your audience bias is negative and your audience is analysis oriented and your credibility is low. So channel choice strategy. Formal or informal? Should we use the informal one or the informal channel choice strategy?
Next, channel choice strategy, writing or speaking. Should we use writing or speaking when we choose the choice strategy? Next, we can choose individual or group.
Is culture strategy. So not all cultures react to senders, messengers, or channels in the same way. It's the best to consider your audience proper reaction from a cultural point of view. So that's the end of our slide today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy my presentation, and have a nice day.